Hello and welcome to Moneylife. It's a sad day today. It's the day when Jet Airways, which was once India's biggest airline, taking over from Indian Airlines, is no more. It's been grounded. There is hope held out that it's going to be revived, but one never knows. What we know is that this emergency revival plan that we talked about just a week or two ago has failed as of Wednesday, and there is no sign of what's going to happen. What I'm discussing today is two issues. One is the failed plan itself, why it failed, who bears the consequences, and the second is a bit of background of the industry. As always, the buck stops at policymakers, politicians, regulators, and bankers. And it is we, the people, the taxpayers, who pay the price. But in this case, our heart goes out to the employees of Jet Airways. 20,000 of them, almost overnight, have no job. Many of them haven't been paid from December or Jan. So many of them were really good at their jobs, waiting patiently, thinking the airline will be revived, and have no idea what happens to their futures anymore. Of course, they will look for jobs. Many of them are good, they land on their feet, but it is a sad state of affairs. Who is responsible? Our policymakers. I'm going to tell you why. But let's first look at why did the deal fail. The beauty is that we have no idea. When I last spoke in my previous video, 1500 crore of emergency funding was to be given. State Bank of India's chairman, Rajneesh Kumar, was giving interviews all over the press. He was beaming out of television studios telling us about this deal that the lenders had struck. So what happened to the deal? Do you know that Jet Airways, as a listed company, State Bank of India, another listed company, is supposed to make disclosures to the stock exchanges. So the last time they made a disclosure, they talked about how clever they were and how 1 rupee of debt had been converted into 50.5% of equity. The equity of Naresh Goyal and Etihad had been halved, and 1500 crore was going to be pumped in. What we know over the last 2 days is that the airline has failed. Forget about 1500 crore, even 400 crore that was demanded was not forthcoming. And suddenly the airline is grounded. So what happened to that equity? What happened to this official legal disclosure that was made to stock exchanges? I wrote to the SBI to ask them. Believe it or not, several hours later, we don't know. The stock exchange does not show any change in shareholding, which means, according to the stock exchange, Naresh Goyal still holds over 50% of the equity. Etihad still holds 25%. The banks have got no equity. This miraculous 1 rupee into 50% has not happened. And we have no answers from State Bank of India, when in fact, instead of a one-para disclosure by lenders, this should have been explained in detail. Now the question is, will the Reserve Bank of India ask questions to the lenders? Nothing's been asked so far. What about SEBI, the market regulator? It is in charge of ensuring that we, the investors, have answers. No, there are no answers because these people apparently are above questioning. What we know today from a cryptic one para that was sent out by lenders yesterday is that there are 4 people in the race. Out of those 4, 2 seem to have objected to Mr. Naresh Goyal. You remember last time I said they have kept a window open. First, they avoided the bankruptcy route. They didn't want to liquidate this company. They didn't want to go through the insolvency and bankruptcy brand new law that is created by this government. They didn't want to use it for Jet Airways. They wanted it protected. So all that has failed. There are 4 apparent bidders who have indicated expressions of interest. They haven't put in a bid. The lenders think that sometime in the next few weeks this is going to fructify into a real bid, but it can only come at a deep haircut. Now we all know that Jet Airways owes over 8,000 crores to a series of banks, mainly Indian public sector banks. So basically they are in limbo. There's 8,000 crore at stake. 20,000 employees without a job, not to mention innumerable passengers who had booked their summer holidays, whose tickets are suddenly cancelled. Many of them have hotels booked, some of them going abroad, so they lose out twice as much, and they have to book tickets once again at very steep rates. What is the Civil Aviation Ministry doing? Remember, this is a licensed industry, which means that the government applies its mind about who can run an airline. So far, we have got nothing much from the Aviation Ministry except a lot of silence and apparent meetings that they've held with other airlines to try and find solutions, to increase the number of flights, to tell them not to hike fares, but none of this of any real use to people who are investors, employees of Jet Airways, or those whose tickets are cancelled without even any inkling that this airline was failing any time in the last couple of months. Now let's understand this industry a little bit. This is a licensed industry. Until 1991, when India began economic liberalization, we were a closed economy. So we had this wonderful airline called Air India, started by J.R.D. Tata, which in the 1960s and early 70s was one of the best airlines in the world. Government in its wisdom decided to nationalize it. J.R.D. Tata remained the chairman. Few years later, he was removed. Until 91, we had only Air India flying abroad, Indian Airlines in India, and these have become monoliths which are employing too many people with humongous losses which are being paid for by us, we the people, because the exchequer gives money, bails them out, which means you and I are paying to keep Indian Airlines alive. 91, we opened it up. Now, I would have thought that there would be a red carpet issued to the Tatas to say, do you want to come back and set up an airline? Instead, for 25 years, our policy has been tweaked and twisted and manipulated by crony capitalists, venal bureaucrats, and all kinds of politicians to ensure that this one company with deep pockets, passion, and reputation is going to be kept out of the business. So who was allowed? Believe it or not, you know the names, East West Airline. Actually, most of you may have not been born at that time, have forgotten the names. So there was a Modi Luft, there was Sahara Airlines, there was Damania Airlines, there was East West Airways, there was Deccan Airways. India has been a graveyard of private airlines having failed. We now have a new crop. Some of them are functioning, 2 of them are doing well, but every few years you have a failure. It all goes down to the kind of people allowed, the nature of competition, the kind of licenses, and twists and turns in policy that happens only in a country which is dictated by crony capitalists. So what happened over here? A chronic defaulter group got an aviation license. Somebody who ran a Ponzi scheme was running an airline. Somebody who was an agro farmer was running an airline. And obviously, it was bound to collapse. In fact, one of the founders was killed in an underworld hit because there was talk about links to all kinds of people. It's the same with Jet Airways. In fact, the background of Naresh Goyal, people who have encountered him, who have suffered because of him, describe him as an ace manipulator. In fact, Jitendra Bhargav, an aviation expert who was with Air India and has been a very strong whistleblower, has been pretty vocal about the manner in which aviation policy has been twisted every few years in order to meet the demands of Naresh Goyal. So when Naresh Goyal is making an IPO, suddenly airlines are allowed to go abroad. Even there, the policy is tweaked in a manner that only Jet is initially eligible to fly abroad. Naturally, it helps his IPO get subscriptions. Few years later, when he needs money, he needs to get in a foreign partner. Policy is tweaked again to allow foreign airlines to come in. At a time when he wanted Etihad to come in and bring a 25% stake, even at that time, policy was tweaked. In fact, 50,000 additional seats of flying out of India were gifted to Etihad in an unrelated deal with Jet Airways almost simultaneously, which means that national resources were given away for a private company so that Etihad's stake and investment in a private company was at a bigger premium. Jitendra Bhargav has written about it. You can read it. Then there's the background of Jet Airways. In 2001, there was an Intelligence Bureau report which talked about links with the underworld, specifically Dawood Ibrahim. Didn't stop at that. There was a journalist called Josie A journalist called Josie Joseph has done a detailed investigation. In fact, he's written a book called A Feast of the Vultures, which was published in December 2016, which is still available on Amazon. You can buy it, which has talked about what this Intelligence Bureau report was and links to the underworld. And he was sued for defamation by Naresh Goyal. It was a 1,000 crore defamation suit, which the journalist intends to fight. So if you want more about that, take a look at that book. But like all the others, here's again a company with a strange background. I'm not saying stop the business, but when you have this background, it's raised in Parliament in 2001 by none other than Arun Shourie, who was then a minister. You would expect that the regulator, Reserve Bank of India, would perk up. The capital market regulator would be alert. Banks who have lent money would be alert. They would have their man on the board. They would look at how their loans are being used. They would look at whether the company needs money by pledging shares. None of this has happened over the years. In fact, even until recently, there is no representative of the lenders on the board. Meanwhile, the debt is increasing. Some time ago, in what a lot of people consider an ego trip, they bought Sahara Airlines, which was floundering because the Sahara, Subrata Roy of Sahara was in serious trouble. So Jet pays 1,700 crore to retain market share. Why did lenders allow it? These kind of acquisitions, whether by Jet or whether by Kingfisher Airlines, which is another defunct airline, with Vijay Mallya making a similar acquisition of Deccan Airways, all of these loans land in the books of bankers. Who are these bankers? Mainly public sector banks. When they are public sector banks, it means that the money belongs to you and me, because every few years the government is recapitalizing this bank. Government which says it's outrageous to waive farmer loans, it's outrageous to waive loans by individuals who have small amounts at stake, will give thousands of crores to recapitalize banks, which is meant for industrialists. Now the irony here is that Vijay Mallya, who is absconding, who has extradition proceedings sitting in London, has been tweeting and taunting banks and saying, why aren't you taking my money? I've paid 100%. Isn't that an interesting question? Because like I said, you and me pay the price. We have no answers. Why aren't they taking Vijay Mallya's money, for heaven's sake? You can continue criminal proceedings against him if he is indulging in money laundering. But if he has submitted documents and he has made a proposal, none of us in the country know why isn't this money being accepted. There should be a statement of sorts from somebody. What we see, all of us who are on Twitter, is seeing this discredited industrialist taunting our banks, taunting our government, and the government has no answers for anybody. That is the kind of society that we have allowed to happen because we don't seem to understand it's our money, our jobs that are at stake, and we are not asking enough of questions. I think it's time to wake up, because look at the 4 people who are likely to bid. This is going to play out over the next few weeks. There are 4 bidders. I'm going to name the names. So let me read them out for you. So these are TPG Partners, Etihad Airways, which already has a big stake, 25% in the airline. And the third is quite interesting. It is the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, NIIF. This is a sovereign fund, quasi-sovereign fund, which means it's again going to be government money. If you ask me, it's quite likely that the best bid will again come from a quasi-government entity, which is again our money flowing through a fund into reviving Jet Airways. Whether it gets revived or not is anybody's guess, but it is again public money that goes. We will watch what happens. The other 3 are private equity companies. We need to see whether they represent someone, whether they themselves are interested. And the big question here is, what kind of haircut are they going to demand? There is 8,000 crores at stake, and it depends on what kind of offer is made, because today an airline that has stopped functioning is far less valuable than an airline which has charged up employees, good service, planes in the air, and services running. That has stopped as of today. Today is the day when Jet Airways is no longer in the skies, and the losses to banks have already increased. So all those bankers who are strutting around, led by Rajneesh Kumar of State Bank of India, owes us some answers. The Civil Aviation Ministry needs to be a chowkidar. We don't need a chowkidar attached to a Twitter handle. We need a chowkidar who's going to stand up and give us answers and tell us what is happening to our money, what is happening to our holidays, what is happening to our jobs. You owe it to us. Thank you.